In the military, clarity isn't a preference, it's survival. So, what happens when the precision and discipline of military briefings collide with the creativity and connection demanded in a corporate keynote? Well, on today's show, we're going to be exploring how elite briefing techniques can be adopted to corporate stages to create presentations that are sharper and impossible to ignore. And we've got a former British military officer who successfully translated high stakes communication methods into a practical, repeatable framework for speakers and leaders around the world. You ready? Let's go. Today's guest, Jimmy Burroughes, built a top 10% global leadership podcast while traveling remotely, and that's not easy. Transformed burned out general managers into thriving entrepreneur and authors. Created proven methodologies helping leadership reclaim 6 or more hours a week. That's fascinating. I'm going to let him take it from here. He'll do a better job of me than I will. So, Jimmy, floor is yours. Give us about a minute of how we got here today.
How did we get here today? We got here today through making all the errors and mistakes possible, learning the hard way, generally the second or third time round, and finally worked out that I could build some sort of business that would help people not do all the things I did wrong the first time round, and try and prevent them burning out, try and prevent them working too hard, try and prevent them having crisis of confidence, imposter syndrome. All these things that many of us wrangle with on a daily basis. That's how we got here. Was that I was not smart enough to work it out the first time around, but when I did work it out, I decided to share it.
Well, quite frankly, I know we were tongue in cheek a little bit, but the people that I like talking to the most are the ones that have got their heads handed to them a few times. Because I got to tell you, even with a manager, I've had great managers. I learned very little from them because it's almost seamless when those things are going on. But when you get it right between the eyes and you feel it, it's a lesson you'll never forget. So I do think, I wish it wasn't that way. I've got 3 kids. That we could learn some of these key lessons without getting knocked around. But I think that's what makes a successful person, particularly if we don't blame everybody else for what just happened.
Oh, yeah. And look, let's face it, the worst moments make the best stories. So there's that is the silver lining to the grey cloud that we often find ourselves sitting underneath as it rains on us.
Yeah. All right, well, let's talk about presentation techniques. And I'm really curious about, you have a very interesting background. So from your background, and you're kind of in 2 camps, what's one presentation technique that in your mind consistently creates almost an aha moment, no matter where you are, whether you're doing a briefing or whether you're doing a keynote, but this one will get you an aha?
It's a good question. I think the types of presentations that I increasingly do now are focused on belief shifting versus teaching. There's a phrase known as the sage on the stage, and it's the person who is coming in and giving all of the content and telling everybody everything they should be thinking, but nobody walks out thinking any different because they've got their own set of beliefs that sit beneath the surface that you as a presenter, speaker, trainer never know about. But they get in the way of what makes common sense at a superficial level. And so if I give you an example, one of the topics that I'll often talk about is the concept that working harder and longer doesn't work when you get to a certain level of seniority. We're taught this from a very young age that if you want to get ahead, work harder and longer. You want good grades in school, work harder. You want to get a great degree, work harder. You want to get that first promotion on the management ladder, work harder and longer. You want the bonus, work harder and longer. And so it's kind of ingrained into us that the secret of success is working harder and longer. And so you stand in front of a group of people as a leadership development person and say, so in order to be a really great leader instead of a good manager, You need to not work harder and longer. And you can see people's faces go, yeah, but everything I've done for the last 35, 40 years is all about working harder and longer. That's how I've got ahead. That must be the secret to success, right? The system has proved it. And that's true until you reach a certain point in your career. And then it won't work, becomes much, much more about working smarter and choosing where to put your time and energy for value and impact, not about just repetition and delivery, or delivery of knocking, we call it whacking moles, but just hitting things as they come up, firefighting and dealing with the crises. It's about moving the dial. So there's this inherent tension, right, in the argument. I want you to not work harder and longer, but you believe that working harder and longer is the secret. So I've got to shift some beliefs. I've got to show you that some of the things you're working on are maybe not the most helpful, most impactful, most valuable things. I've got to I've got to turn some light bulbs on in your head and shine some light on the reasons why you're in that circumstance, or because you're following that wiring. And my goal in every single speech, keynote, session, workshop, whatever I do, is for people to go, never thought about it like that. That's the goal, right? So any keynote that I do, any presentation I do, is all around belief shifting and making people go, maybe I haven't got it down as much as I thought I did. Maybe I could do something a little bit different.
Well said. It's interesting because you're describing the professional speaking circuit in a sense. I was brought up by a Marine, and I was taught, harder, longer, harder, work longer, and then, and I did. Just like I was told. It almost cost me my marriage, and it cost just about every professional speaker friend I had on the circuit when I was really out there. It cost them their marriages.
Mhm.
So it was either start learning how to work smarter, or, okay, be out 300 nights a year if you like. I don't really know if the children are going to know your name. You're going to miss every
Mhm.
birthday party there is, and good luck with the marriage. So yeah, it's instinct versus logic again here. The
Yeah.
instinct, particularly the way we're trained, is just outwork the person to your right and left. But I like renaming it where you've got it, which is, no, we can be smarter. And there
Mhm.
were changes I know I had to make to get a little bit smarter. Uh,
And if we use that example,
yeah.
um, the idea of impact and value on the professional speaking circuit, if it's not a speech or a keynote that's going to generate you more work, if it's not a speech or keynote where you can sell something from the stage, if it's not a speech or a keynote where it's aligned with your core business, then should you be doing it? And often we'll say yes because it's money. Oh, great, okay, cool. It's because it's money. Um, so one of the belief shifts that we create with the clients we work with is, what's your definition of success? And if it is the size of your bank balance or the size of your house, amazing, happy for you. That's cool. But there are other types of success. There's a beautiful book by a guy called Sahil Bloom, which is the five types of wealth. And he talks about your health as you go through middle age and towards the end of your life. Talks about your wealth, obviously. Talks about your circle, the network of people that you hang around with. The big one for me is freedom. And certainly, when I talk to people who are working all the hours that God send, what's your biggest regret? I miss my kids' sports days, miss my anniversary, miss family events. And I was like, well, if you could turn up to all those things, if you had the freedom to make a choice on when you worked, would that not be better? Well, 100% yes. Okay, so let's work towards that as our definition of success. And I think about my own life when I burned out in 2017 as a GM. I was working 16 to 18 hours a day. And yes, I was making great money, and I had all the cars and the swimming pools and the houses and the holidays and everything to go with it. I was so miserable. Now, when I started my business, I earned a fraction of that, but I didn't have to work every day. I could take the morning off if I wanted to. And now we're in a lucky position where the business allows me to do that and earn, a decent living. But, my wife had just had to take care of something. And so I spent the last 2 hours with my daughter just hanging out,
Yeah.
because I wanted to. And we travel when we want to. We work when we want to. And it's a great lifestyle to be able to create when you're not obsessed with the size of your bank balance. And actually, say what we found is the bank balance has outperformed the corporate hard graft. and we have the freedom. And
Yeah.
so by focusing on the freedom, we got to where we wanted to get to. I think that's a really key shift that has to be made. And it sounds like you've made a similar move in your own
Yeah,
life.
well, I was at the 1 yard line there, because it's the professional speaking world, and I'm talking to professional speakers now. It's a tough world. It's a wonder. I think it's the greatest profession in the world. But what you just said fits every profession there is that I can think of, except the professional speaking world, and it does. But it does at a cost because
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you know this. The more you're on that stage, the more you get booked. The more
Mm-hmm.
you're seen, the more you get booked. Okay. And when you start pulling yourself off that stage and pick your spots more carefully, you can control everything except you got to work 3 times harder on the booking side where it was easy. Now, that said, it's not even a close contest of okay, so would I like to be a good father and a good husband, a good friend, and work harder? Yeah. But let's put that on the table. It will mean it gets harder. And there are other professions doesn't quite work that way. Can I throw one other thing at you real fast? You were
Mm-hmm.
talking about but happiness for a second. I saw some years ago a piece that was done by John Stossel, I believe it was, and one of the things that they isolated was control, being in control of your life in a sense. And they had 1 year olds, I mean babies, that they were showing pictures to. And when they saw the pictures, they smiled. And when they stopped the pictures, they weren't all that thrilled. But they had a little trigger that they were hitting to move the pictures. When they gave them the pictures back, but took away the control, in other words, you can hit that button, but it's not controlling what's going on. That really set them off. They
Mm-hmm.
preferred not seeing the pictures. And I remember thinking, that's a pretty cool example of how early this begins to seed itself of we want to be in control of what we're doing. And we're not happy when we're not.
No, no. And I think what you described beautifully, there were sort of three or four things that were popping into my head while you were talking there. Um, Dan Pink's Drive 3.0, which talks about purpose, autonomy, and mastery. So I need to know what I'm doing has some use or purpose. I need to know that I'm in control of my own destiny and I've got some freedom to make some decisions. And so I've got some latitude to do some stuff. And I want to feel like I'm getting better on a daily basis. And that I think applies in the speaking world as in most environments. If you want to stay motivated in something, you need purpose, autonomy, and mastery. The other thing that really came up for me while you were talking was this whole work from home during COVID thing. The loss of control that people had. All of a sudden, people, the telecommuting concept to work from home before COVID wasn't really a thing.
No.
People, were expected to be in the office, and then all of a sudden, we had to work from home because COVID locked down the world. I was living in New Zealand at the time, and it was literally locked down. Like you couldn't go outside; you would be picked up by the police and sent home. Um, and then all of a sudden, in sort of 24, 25, it was the back to the office. Everybody has to come back to the office, and people were like, well, I don't want to. I'm quite enjoying working from home now, and I've got my office set up, and I've got a dog, and I don't want to come back to the office. I don't want to be around people and distractions and stupid meetings. I want to get on with the stuff that I've been paid to do. And so, to that point, it's that loss of control people really feel that I think is something that you can tap into as an emotional trigger as well.
I agree. All right, let's put these military briefings and keynotes side by side now. Promised we would. Uh, what did you have to unlearn when you came out of the military and got into more of the keynote world? And it's not a trick question because I was actually thinking how I do this all the time. I always think how I'd answer the questions I'm asking my guests. It's a nasty little habit, but I was thinking about this one of well, I'm just curious about your answer there because I was having a little trouble with this one.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. One of the biggest revelations when you leave the military is then that not everybody else is on the same page as you. Their priorities are not the same. Their intentions are not the same. Their goals and aspirations are not the same. And most people in the military they've gone there for a reason, but they've got a sense of pride in the unit that they work for. They are motivated to get promoted or to move up the organization. They want to do their best, and you don't fight for your boss, you fight for the guy next to you on the left and right. And so in the briefings, your job as an officer is to essentially paint this vision or picture of what the plan is, to fill in enough gaps that people have the information they need to execute on those pieces, and making the assumption that everybody wants to go and do this thing because it's the enemy. We're the good guys, they're the bad guys. Let's go do what we need to do. And whatever kind of part of the army I worked with, briefings were always pretty much the same format. We learn a format at Sandhurst, which is the military training academy, and you deliver that consistently over the time that you're in the army. And then I came to the military, so I came out of the military and came to the corporate world, and was hit with change management and stakeholder engagement and trying to influencing skills and all of this, what I would call HR language that basically gets in the way of getting the job done. When you're in the military, I'm the boss, made a decision. We've discussed what we're going to do with the senior leadership and group around me. But when I'm in briefing mode, this is the plan that's decided, we're going to go do it. Get on board. And there's a discipline structure system that's around that. When you're in the civilian world, none of that works because you can't assume that everybody's on the same page as you. There are going to be people in the audience who have vastly different backgrounds to where you've come from, vastly different sets of beliefs, and they want to hear different things from you. So I had to unlearn the expectation piece, the surety that people were there to listen and wanted to learn. But I also had to learn a whole lot of new skills, stakeholder influencing. All of the neuroscience that I did was post-military, all of the neuro decision-making, neuro leadership, the change management piece, the stakeholder engagement piece, all of those are very, very, very different to what was in the military. What I would caveat all of that with, though, is the things I did learn in the military, which I carried through, which might be another question, but I'll jump to it, was clarity. Clarity, brevity, purpose, intent, vision, impact, value, all of those things that the military ingrains into you from day one, all of those I've kept. And I think that's why I've been reasonably successful in where I've spoken, is because I really focus on the clarity piece, making sure people have got the message clear in their heads by presenting it or delivering it in various different ways, depending on the size of the audience, depending on the style of the audience, depending on their needs and preferences. But getting the message across so they can do something with whatever we've done. And I go back to that first question we asked around belief shifting. My job is to make sure I've shifted belief. Therefore, how do I do that? Therefore, here's my plan for execution. All of that is military skills.
Right. All right. What about, I have two thoughts on this. First, what about the entertainment value? And again, being on the outside looking in, that's why I want you to answer it. I'm thinking, if I'm getting a military briefing, I don't know if it has to be all that entertaining. This is what it is. A matter of fact, that might be an oxymoron. Don't make this entertaining. Whereas when you step onto a keynote stage, obviously all the content is there, but you got to fight for that audience a little bit harder. What about that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting insight, because military briefings, they do need to be engaging. You've got to sell a plan where you're asking people essentially to put their lives on the line, and they could potentially die in what you're asking them to do. So you've got to sell the plan. I think in a keynote, you've got to sell the message. It's a very similar idea. You probably have a little bit more skipping around the stage and fairy dust in a keynote presentation than you would in a military briefing. But it's adapting your style to the audience.
I haven't used fairy dust in a good 5-6 years. Lay off the fairy dust.
I'm all about the fairy dust, and I say to people, I'm an excitable English chap, and I'm going to skipping around the room, sprinkling fairy dust as I go. Right. This isn't because I want to be, camp, but it's more entertaining. It makes it more inspiring. People, your variation of tone, your cadence, the way you do things has to be entertaining. But the goal is still shifting belief. So whatever tool I need out of my toolbox to sell that message is where I'll go. If I'm talking to a bunch of construction engineers at a construction engineer conference, or very recently in Queenstown in New Zealand, I did a keynote for epoxy flooring managers. Very different tone to if I was talking to, the Women's Institute or a ladies' convention. So you adapt your tone and style to entertain to a certain point, but the goal, the job, is to move people.
Right.
I can't remember who said it, but it was they won't remember what you said or did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. If I can make them
Maya
feel
Angelou, I believe, is the
that
author.
my Angelou, that's right. If I can make people feel, I never thought about it like that, then I feel like I've done my job.
Okay, let me pin you down here a little bit, and we'll go back and forth because I'll give you my version of the keynote world. But first of all, I had no idea you had to sell your message. I would have assumed if it's a military order, that's the sale, because we said so. Now, hoof, as my dad would say. Uh, but tell me, is there a process you followed? And you can really skip to it because I know this could take 20 minutes to answer, but very lightly, about 60 seconds or less. Tell me if there's a process you followed, and I'll return fire and I'll give you 60 seconds or less on this side, see where we meet. All right. You go first on the military side when you're doing a briefing. Technique wise, how are you selling it?
Um, So we have a structure that we follow in the
Right.
military briefing process, which is essentially ground situation, mission, execution, logistics, if that's the very simplistic version of it. So what's going on in the map and the model uh, for us and for them? Where are their forces? Where are our forces? Situation, what's happening? What do we get on? What do everybody need to know? This is contextual information. You're setting up purpose. You're setting up the reason why we're doing this. Mission, this is the thing I want us to do. Execution, this is how I want us to do it. And that's constrained within, if I use a very simple version, I want you to go left, you to go center, and you to go right. How you do that is up to you, but I want you to do those things. This is your outcome or your deliverable. That's actually execution. And the logistics, here's all the stuff that we need to know to get it done. So it's quite structured in terms of the way you do it. But the way you deliver it is essentially engaging those people to go, yeah, I'm ready to do this. Because it's our job to sell that plan. It's our job to say, we believe this is the right thing to do. We need to go do it. And yes, it is an order at the end of the day. And I suppose if you don't do it or you run in the opposite direction, there's going to be some consequence to that. But you'll know from your experience, it's always, always, always better to be a leader with people who are engaged and want to be there versus people who are complying and conforming. We talked a little bit before we started about what's happening in the US right now. It's a compliance culture. It's creating a compliance culture with an autocracy. I don't want to go into politics, but that's not the way to inspire people to deliver the best things ever. The way to inspire people is to inspire them, is to engage them, is to make them excited about what they're going to be doing. And that's the job of the military officer, is to sell the plan.
Right. And see, from our side, and I'll tell you the part I was waiting for. And I didn't think I'd hear it, and I'm not sure why I would hear it. But on the outside is what we'll call it, is we can do all that. But a lot of times we have to actually move to somebody's personal level of greed. You may have heard the term a whiff 'em. What's in it for
Mm-hmm.
me? Now, in the military, and again, I was not in the military. My dad, military, how about 7 boys in World War II at the same time? We could have been Saving Private Ryan and his Jollis family here. 7 of them at the same time. But there isn't a whole lot of, we're going to take this hill and here's what's in it for you if we do. Okay. No, that's what we're doing. And maybe this is what's in it for our country or, our team. But so there's a little bit more on the personal side of, I'm going to tell you about this, the way we're going to do, but here's what's in it for you to learn it. Here's how it will help the company. Here's what will help you on the job. Here's how it will help you at home. That's going into our model. Not a whole lot on your briefing side on that, or did I miss it?
No, I think you're right, because and I think I mentioned it in one of the earlier answers. The expectation when you sign up to the military is that you're doing it for Queen and country, or King and country now. And also, guys fight for the people on the left and right of them.
Right.
So when they're in a briefing situation, the reason I'm doing this is to keep my buddies alive.
Right.
The reason I'm doing this is to make sure we make progress on the objective as a platoon, a company, a battalion, a brigade. The reason I'm doing this is for my country. And so it's almost an implicit
Okay.
expectation that we don't need to sell that to you because you've signed up for that. The reason you're in the military is to defend or fight for your country.
Okay.
Not whereas most people, the reason they're in their job is to pay their mortgage, and
Right.
you've got to convince them of the rest.
Right. Makes complete sense to me. How about storytelling for you? Uh, I, I, maybe I'm guessing. I'm thinking maybe not a ton of storytelling on the military side. Maybe you can correct me on that, but something that is rather important on the keynote side, that merger of storytelling. Um,
Hmm.
were you able to transfer? Or did you have to learn it from scratch when you got out?
Yeah, 100% had to learn it from scratch. There's some beautiful storytelling frameworks out there. We use the Pixar pitch in our business, um, but it's there are multiple different frameworks and styles that I guess I've been exposed to over the years. In the military, no, it's not really a thing. Yeah, I guess you do tell a story when you're talking about the situation, enemy and friendly forces. So you're painting a picture of what's going on, but it's not in the same way. No.
Right. Yeah. No, I was filling a bucket of sand one day at the beach. No, this is not going to work here. I got it.
I tell a lot of stories about my time in the military, but I didn't tell many in the military.
Right. Right. I think you're free now. What's the most surprising military principle, communication principle that does translate perfectly to the outside world that maybe we wouldn't necessarily connect with ourselves?
Um, I think I've mentioned clarity, purpose, intent, vision, impact, value. They're probably, but they're not probably very surprising. They're fairly
No.
obvious.
No.
Um, the the one that the one that I think is probably got me ahead in more situations than I care to care to name is selling a plan, selling with confidence that you know
Right.
what you're talking about. My wife says this to me all the time before I go into a workshop. She said, "You are the expert, and they're not. So you know the right answers, and you know what you said you should be saying. And if you screw it up, nobody will ever know because you still know what you basically you know what you're saying and where you're going. And one of the things they teach you in the military is essentially you've got to sell the plan with confidence. You've got to believe when you go into that room, even if you don't like the plan you've been given and you've got to make your own plan out of it, or you don't agree with the intention, or you don't agree with the direction, or, attack that hill is not your first choice. When you're in the briefing room, it's 100% the right thing to do. And it's what we're doing. And I
Right.
think taking that into how I share leadership messages, how I share a shift of belief, how I share behavioral moves, how I share frameworks is, I believe this. I
Right.
believe it's the right thing to do. And tomorrow I might believe something different because I'll have learned and grown and experienced something else. But today, this is the best I've got. And you're going to get my best every single time you see me. That I think is probably something that surprised me a little bit that really works when you're on the stage.
Well, I'll give you another one that you might just not realize, but you're what we call an unconscious competent and I haven't seen you present, but I just know from coming up through a military family, uh, I always appreciated the level of discipline that my dad had from the military. And there were certain things, we went and saw a ball game. We didn't see it in a disciplined manner. Okay. But when we had a task, there was no quitting the task. There was a very disciplined approach to the task. When I trained for certain things as an athlete, I consider it one of the greatest gifts he ever gave me. Without overusing the word, was just the fact that there people sometimes refer to me as, I think I'm the one who does it actually, a little OCD-ish. In other words, I really like to make sure we do it a certain way. But that's discipline from the military and a little bit of Xerox of I like repeatable and predictable patterns and behaviors, things that I can measure. Um,
Mhm.
so, um, can you make a connection there? You see it?
100%. The one of the things I think that allows ex-military people to perform well in industry is we deliver, we get stuff
Yeah.
done. Um, whether it's solving a problem, whether it's finding a way, whether it's making something with no resources and making it happen. If I think about all of my sort of close ex-military peers, they've all done really well in the civilian world. And part of that is grit. When you get knocked on your ass, you get back up again, dust yourself off, and you keep going. Because there
Right.
is no other way in the military, unless you're dead. keep fighting. And I think that concept probably does apply, yeah, to the civilian world as well. That's been not. I guess it is a surprise that I thought everybody was like that when I was in the military, but then I realized pretty quickly that they weren't, and so that's an advantage.
Yeah. All right, last question for you, and we'll begin to kind of wrap ourselves down. Can you share a moment where you were delivering a presentation? Maybe it didn't land the way you expected. And I'm talking about on the outside now, because I have to pay you a compliment. I've worked with some military folks. I've never seen them approach their military kind of presentations and briefings with the pride of a presenter that you did. Okay. A lot of them, because I think you can get away with it the other way. You may not be as good, but remember, in the corporate world, that's going to catch up to you. Can you describe a time where failure taught you a lesson? In other words, you got up there and you learned a lesson uh, from failing on stage. And again, I'm going to not work on the military side. I'm working on your keynote side on this one. Give me one.
Yeah, yeah. Um, if I go back about 6 or 7 years, I just started like seriously getting into the consulting world, and I truly believed that demonstrating knowledge was key to kind of building trust and credibility. So everything I did would be, here's the top line message, and here's the 15 things that sit underneath that I've thought about, and here's the 25 things that have fed into that I've thought about, and here's the 50 things that I've sourced materials from, and I want to show you all of that because I want you to know that I've done the work. And in the corporate world, that's really important, right? You've got to take to your boss the credibility of having done all the work. And as a consultant, trying to break into the consulting world, had to try and show that. And I remember doing a keynote where I think I had about 100 slides to get through in 60 minutes because I wanted to show that I'd done all this work.
Oof.
And it was a very kind, I'll be forever grateful. It was a very kind speaker who was also in the group with me. And he said, what you said in the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes should have been 60 minutes worth of content. And the rest of it was just blur. Less slides, less content, more impact. And it sits to me to this day that I now don't use PowerPoint. I don't use slides at all in any of our practice. I'll stand up and I'll speak for 2 days without taking a break with no slides at all. Just a whiteboard pen and a whiteboard and a group of people who I want to engage. And it was one of those things that I learned the hard way from just not landing. The impact is like, you could see people were glazed over. You could see people were bored. You could see people were like, that doesn't matter. It's not important to me that you've done all this work. What I want to know is what's in this for me. And so that's where we've taken the business over the last 6, 7 years. Is now it's very much, here's a thing that you can think about. Here's how you can think about it. Here's how you can use it. What might stop you using it? How do you now think you can go do something with that? That's really the pattern that we repeat in every presentation. But there's no content. There's no slides. There's no PowerPoint. There's no flashy presentational stuff. It's just me being honest and vulnerable, talking about some of the mistakes I made, talking about some way that you could not make those mistakes, and then getting you to think about how you might use that. That's probably the hardest lesson I learned, but also one of the most valuable lessons.
Well, I actually had a 1A and 1B to final questions. My final question was give this audience one thing they can leave with. But I want them to leave with what you just said, because I do believe, and I'm pretty outspoken about this, we could take the 10 biggest mistakes speakers make, and 9 of them collectively won't equal the number one mistake, which you just identified, which is the instinct is always we put in too much. And it's because we're looking at a piece of paper that's got that's 3 pages and think, how am I going to speak on that for an hour? And it kind of freaks us out a little bit when we don't realize, well, there's going to be some facilitation, questions, stories. There's a lot going on those 3 pages. So I like where you're at. I will say this, and I'm going to say it, and then I want to check back on you in a year. You are so scarred from that experience that I don't necessarily think, listen, 100 PowerPoint slides. I was wincing on that side when you said it. And I don't have any stock in Microsoft on this, but let's not blame PowerPoint. Let's blame not using PowerPoint properly. So, like anything else, we flavor that presentation with a bunch of different things. I so badly want to hear you speak and hear that audience speak, but I got 60 minutes. I could show you 4 or 5 slides. I can then go to the whiteboard. You're a pitcher. You keep throwing fastballs at me. I want to throw a curve, a sinker, a slider, and so maybe show a little video over here. We really spice it up, and we're not taking away from the message. We're adding to it. But there's still scar tissue with you. I don't know if you're ready for all that, but
Oh,
don't
look,
blame the
I don't
PowerPoint
disagree.
necessarily. All right.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. For me, it's a point of difference in the industry for the way that I speak is that most people get up and they click through slides, three bullet points per slide for an hour, and it's just death-defyingly dull.
Right.
And so, point of difference for me is that there's no content, there's no agenda. We go in the room, we talk about your problems and challenges, and we deal with them.
Right.
So it's almost off the cuff facilitation and speaking. Give me a topic that you want me to talk about, and let's deal with that today. So there's no preparation required in terms of making slides, but there's an awful lot of preparation required in terms of knowing all my stuff.
How about
all
Jimmy?
of this stuff behind me is all that.
Yeah. How about small group activities?
Yep. Love that, breaking out, sharing back. There's I can't remember the name of them now. There's 21 different facilitation frameworks that you can use. That we employ all of those to make sure that the way that they're getting the message is landing in the most effective way. The power of speaking around a table and then sharing back is great. The power of putting something myself on a post-it note and then seeing what other people have put on post-it notes, trying to trigger different thought mechanisms. Absolutely. I love all of that stuff. I love videos. I love people recording on their own phones and watching them back. All those things that you can do that make a massive difference. What I think the scarring for me on the PowerPoint is people use it as a crutch.
Yeah.
And if you need a crutch, then you're not fit. So let's stay fit.
Oh, Jimmy just slipped back to the military, Jimmy, for a moment there. Okay.
It just happened, didn't it? Oh, sorry,
yes,
I couldn't help it.
Yes, sir. I will, sir. I will, sir. How do people get a hold of you, Jimmy?
A couple of ways. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's probably the most popular at the moment. Jimmy Burroughes. Or you can go to our website, which is jblhighperformance.com. And there's multiple ways in there to get in touch, and also heaps of free resources and stuff that might be useful.
Right. And if you didn't pick it up by the accent, Jimmy's not from Alabama. So we'll add about 5 hours when we're talking to him. Is it 5? I'm on the East Coast. It's about 5 hours to you? You 5 hours
I'm in Cabo, actually, in Mexico right now. So, we live most of the year in Cabo. Just trying to stay out. When you live in England and you grow up and it rains every day, you want to go somewhere it's sunny every day. That's the plan.
Well, at least I knew you weren't from Alabama. Let's put it that way.
That's true.
Listen, absolute pleasure getting to know you. And Jimmy does keep an eye on that LinkedIn. That's how he and I met. So, but really a pleasure. And thanks for bridging that gap for us. I think that was really valuable. Picked up some great training techniques. So appreciate you being on the show, my friend.
Thanks so much, Rob. I really appreciate it too.
Okay. Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please follow, rate, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. For more resources and to connect with Rob, visit thepresentationwhisperer.com.